So now we've discussed EER diagrams in great depth, and they're very important and they're very powerful. But there's another way to model that goes beyond EER diagrams. It's called the EER diagram, and that stands for an extended entity relationship diagram. The extension, you ask, has to do with inheritance. So we'll talk about the idea of inheritance, how it can be shown on an EER diagram. We'll learn some new diagramming techniques, and we'll also figure out how to convert database diagrams that have inheritance into a physical model. So this is an important section. I hope that you get a lot out of it. So there's a question about whether inheritance is even needed to show on an entity relationship diagram. And there are two fundamental reasons why you should consider a subclass or a subtype table. First of all, if the subclass entity type has unique attributes that other members of the superclass do not share, that's a good reason to show a subclass in your diagram. And the second reason is if the subclass entity type engages in unique relationships. Otherwise, you should probably use only one entity type and maybe add a field to store the information. So consider a system where you're keeping track of students at a university and parking, and you want to keep track of their vehicle. A vehicle can be broken down into subclasses like car, motorcycle, and truck, but you have to ask yourself the question, is it really important? I'll give you a parking pass for your vehicle no matter what it is. And if I really need to know if it's a car, a motorcycle, or a truck, maybe I can add a field to the vehicle table called vehicle type. And it can be an enum that can store the values, the string values, car, motorcycle, or truck. So even though there could be subclassing going on, you don't need to represent it in an ER diagram, unless one of those first two conditions were present. In our next lesson, we're going to look at a complicated example of inheritance, and we're going to base it off of an employee. And we're going to have three different kinds of inheritance. Here's the first one. We could say that there are different types of subclasses of employee based on the employee's job, like secretary, engineer, and technician. We will also have another subclass of employee, the managers. Not every employee is a manager, only certain ones are. So that's more based on a role that is played. And we're going to look at a third subclassing of employees based on how they're paid, whether they are salaried or whether they are hourly. The figure on the right depicts how employees are subclassed based on jobs. So you can see that, for example, E1 is a secretary, and so is E4 and E5. You'll also note that E2 is an engineer, and then there are others. E8, for example, is a technician. So we're going to go through that particular model. I do want to point out one thing to you guys, though, and that is if we look at employee E6. Notice that E6 is neither a secretary, nor an engineer, nor a technician. We'll talk about this when we explore this particular schematic in greater depth.